Hello, dear Meg. Oh, what a nice idea. Lots of people listening. We like that. I know you get a kick out of hearing us, but you can imagine how it is for us to know that there are actually people on the other end of the line listening to our words as we speak them. It's thrilling for us. We're used to trying to whisper in your ear, and some people hear us and some people don't at all, and some people hear us correctly and others go, oh, is there something in my ear? It's bothering me. So this is a great pleasure for us when we get to be on the radio and talk to everyone in person. So we hope that this will continue, this lovely chat that we have on Wednesday nights, and that more and more people will join us, because I feel the energy coming back. It's wonderful. We can feel all of the souls who are listening and connecting with us, and the energy is just beautiful. So the more the merrier. Bring your friends, folks. And on that note, I'd like to remind people, this is the time of the ascension of planet Earth. So it's no time for all of you to be feeling self-conscious. There are much more important things to do. So those of you who have held back from talking to your family or your friends, well, you can stop thinking about it that way. It doesn't matter what their response is. What matters is that they hear about these wonderful conversations we're having, and that they hear about Sananda's new scriptures, and that they open their minds and their hearts. And of course, if you bring them to one of these radio shows, they're not going to be able to resist. Once they hear us speaking to them, they'll be so curious. It will melt their hearts, because everyone is becoming more ready to hear us, to open their hearts, to take part in this wonderful ascension process. So, just the way stage fright is a terrible thing to indulge in, it spoils all your fun. Well, so is any kind of self-consciousness or hesitation or reservation about sharing with people what you really feel is true. Now, if you're one of those folks who might have just tuned in and are saying, oh, this is all nonsense, I couldn't possibly tell anyone about this, they'll think I'm crazy. Well, maybe they won't. And maybe your telling them will make all the difference in their lives. Everyone needs to be welcomed into the circle of love. No one should be left out. And if you're making it the reason that you're too shy or you're too worried about what they'll think of you, well, you are depriving them of a wonderful opportunity. So don't judge for people. Let them decide. And you just step aside and say, well, I've been listening to this very interesting program, and there are messages, too, that come directly from God. What do you think of that? And let them say, oh, well, that's impossible. We know the Bible is the only message that was directly from God. And you can say, well, God says that isn't true. In fact, there are many inaccuracies and poorly translated phrases in the Bible that we would like to set straight. You don't have to tell them a great percentage of it is wrong. You can just say something about, misunderstandings and poor translations and over-translations. Of course, you know that about the Bible. Everyone does, that it's been translated and reorganized and retranslated so many times. It's a bit like telephone. You know that game, don't you? We're very amused when we see people playing that game, because that's exactly the way the stories are told from the old days. And they begin with, "Hello, my name is George," and they end up with, "Isn't it a blue sky?" And you wonder, how on earth did it change from where it began to where it ended up? Well, that's the case with the Bible. There are some things there that do capture the feel at times of what was going on, but much of it is not accurate. And so we have asked Sananda to come back and revise the new scriptures to include much new information that we couldn't possibly have included the first time around. So there are some corrections and there are some important changes that you will find very exciting. And I guarantee you, even those of you who've read the new scriptures are going to be rather amazed when you find the pieces that we've added. And there are many. Shall I give you a teaser? All right. Well, one of the things that we included in the new version of the new scriptures, look for the 2015 version. We've included a line where we have told the truth about who El Morya is. And it's amazing to me that so few people have guessed. But of course, our beloved son, who is the true identity, El Morya, has been very close to the chest about his actual incarnations. In fact, has blatantly denied that he's ever had any incarnations on Earth. And of course, that's silly, isn't it? Because all of you have been involved in many incarnations here, and especially the ones who are so dedicated to us and to this project. Have you guessed who I'm talking about? Of course, it is none other than your beloved Ashtar. So all the places in the literature where you see El Morya being referenced, you'll notice that is your beloved Ashtar. Now, the reason it was included in the new scriptures is because the one who came here as Jesus at that time was what we have called a soul project. Of course, Sananda was the lead soul and now takes the responsibility and the heat for whatever happened in those days. So it was Sananda and your beloved Saint-Germain and, of course, Ashtar. Now, the three of them got together, and Sananda felt it was going to be a difficult challenge and assignment, and so he asked his brothers to come along with him. They may not have all been together every minute. They sometimes alternated. Sometimes we're all there at the same time. But it was very helpful to Sananda to have his dear brothers there with him for support, encouragement, company when things were difficult. So that is what we've called a soul project. And you've been learning from these conversations and messages that the organization that is a body with a soul is far more flexible and fluid than you had thought before. So you see, it was possible for Sananda to be the lead soul and for his brothers to join him in the body or not, depending on their assignments at the time or the need. And then, of course, our Mary Magdalene was the one that you now know as KATHRYN. She was not a soul project. It was simply KATHRYN's soul, who came as the embodiment of Mary Magdalene. And you know, of course, that Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. She was Jesus' wife. And in fact, they had a very lovely life together. You'll read all about it in the new scriptures, with the new information about Mary Magdalene and what their life was really like together, and how long they lived as well. So I encourage all of you to read it, to ponder it, and to think of it not as a replacement for anything, not as a contradiction to the Bible or a replacement for anything. It's simply the true story, told very simply, without great detail. It's not a history book. It is a short description, but told from Sananda's heart, and with his beloved twin flame writing it down. So it is the combination of the two of them writing this story. That was not recognized in the past, and I now ask KATHRYN's forgiveness for asking her to say these things. She doesn't like it when I ask her to talk about herself, but sometimes she doesn't remember a lot of what we've said anyway, so I'm taking advantage. I heard you, Mother. All right, KATHRYN, thank you. I won't ask you to reveal anything else for now. So there we have it, the story of the new scriptures from our beloved Sananda and KATHRYN, written with great care and great love. And we hope, Father and I, that you will carefully read, carefully listen to the true messages encoded there, the messages of love that will reach into your heart, that will reconnect you with us in the most powerful way possible. For things are different now, aren't they? Things are changing. The energies on the planet have changed tremendously in the last few weeks. You're aware of the departure of the Archon, ones that were such a problem for planet Earth. There is peace in the universe. Well, it seems to many of you that nothing has changed on planet Earth. That is not the case. We have talked for years now about the prosperity and the blessings that are coming. We had desisted from the discussions about those things because KATHRYN asked us not to, as long as we couldn't tell you for certain what was going to happen. And I think some of you, many of you now understand that when we did tell you that the revaluation of the currencies would happen during the coming week, we truly believed that would be so. And then we learned that there were many on Earth who would, well, I'm giving KATHRYN the image of throwing a curveball. That's the expression you use. It's a good one. There were many who would throw a curveball or a wrench into the works, and it would upset everything, and we would have to start over. Well, that process has happened about 100 times since the last time we didn't tell you what was going to happen. And it's a good thing we didn't, because it has dragged on, hasn't it? But the energies are different now. The light workers on the ground are brave, courageous helpers, the ones we call the boots on the ground, who are on the front lines of creating new governance, new financial systems, are absolutely succeeding. There is an entire system of governance and of financial systems that will simply rise up to fill in and take over for the ones that you have known. The new systems will be more fair. No, I'll rephrase that. Will be fair. There will be no funnel which sucks all the money from every transaction that occurs on the face of the earth into the pockets of the wealthiest few. It has been an abomination how that has increased in the last few years, where the rich get richer and richer and richer and richer, and everybody else is truly hurting. We know that. It will not continue. Those of you, beloved light workers, will find relief and will at last be able to accomplish the wonderful projects and creative ideas you've had on hold for years, waiting for this blessing. You'll be surprised how easily it all flows now, because so much work has gone into this, so much effort on both sides of the veil to create a smooth transition. Now, there still are some troubles, yes, but you would not know from your media how few and far between they are. There still are serious things happening. The cabal is on the run. They may try a few last-ditch attempts to create havoc, and they're good at that. The earthquake, for instance, in Nepal, was a tragic and horrid event. It was man-made. I will tell you now, this was the nefarious plan of those who wished to control planet Earth and are no longer able to do so. They are still vindictive. They are still rather deranged. In my message to you, which you will receive later tonight, I explained to you the more deranged and vindictive a soul is, the more it is the mark of one who has been tortured and abused. It may not be a one-to-one relationship quite, but it's close. The more destructive, the more vicious, and angry a person is, the more they wear the marks of torture and abuse, mistreatment of all kinds. And in the case of these darkest ones who have been members of the cabal for years on end, for lifetimes, they were the ones who recycled in the fourth dimension and never came back to the higher realms to be healed, to feel our love, to learn of what they had done, to have a chance to make good, as all of you have done. All of you have had lifetimes in which you did cruel things. There is no one in this project who has not taken part in the darkness and the cruelty, because it was not possible. Some have, perhaps more dramatic examples than others, but there is no one who was spared. There is no one who can claim to be pure and innocent of all dark behavior. It could not be. If you're here, you have been involved in this process. And all of you knew before you came here that that was a danger. And many, many have fallen. Now, I have told you the story of the sisters, the archangels who came to give birth to the children from across the universe who were in danger of being left behind. They wanted to nurture those children whose souls had been damaged by having lived in darkness. And it was the beginning of the trouble on earth when those kind and generous women incarnated here, our beloved archangels. They could not withstand the troubles that came. Once they gave birth to a child who was confusing to them, who brought a tremendous amount of what you have called karma with them. They carried feelings and thoughts that their parents could not understand, had never experienced themselves, because earth had been pure, really was the paradise that you have heard in the myths. It was the paradise that it will again become. I wanted you to know the whole story because it's what led up to this time. It's important that you understand. It was not the fault of the women. The story of Adam and Eve is entirely wrong. Yes, the children did partake of the knowledge of good and evil. Initially, it was only in order to try to help their children. But once they reached out, once they opened themselves to study, to become close to those who had been involved in darkness, little by little, they were caught up in it themselves. You know that from last week's message. The reason that the brothers remained in the higher dimensions was, of course, first because they could not give birth, but also, as long as they came in their male suits, you might call it. Some did come. Occasionally one of our sons would come to Earth to try and incarnate with his beloved twin, who had already become embroiled in darkness, and it was never successful. We found that no one could withstand the intensity, the trauma, the heartache, and eventually the fall that it caused. Once a soul, a human soul, begins to suffer so profoundly, they become vulnerable. And that was the story of all the ones who tried to rescue their twin flames. You'll hear from Serapis Bey tonight. He was one who was involved in that project. He will tell you the story. So we found that any of the brothers who tried to incarnate with their twins to help them to come to the light were sucked in themselves. And so many of them remained in the dark, were convinced to recycle in the fourth dimension, just as the women had. I shouldn't say many of them, everyone who tried. There were only a few. And so it was decided we would not permit that any longer. And so our beloved sons would come to Earth to incarnate, but never within the dark families, never within those who were in power. The families of darkness were too intense. And what we found was that if anyone incarnated in such a family, they could not survive in the light. Children, human children, are too sensitive, too kind, too loving to survive a parent who is their tormentor. Now, these families I'm talking about are not any run-of-the-mill cruelty, as you might think of it. They were grooming assassins, leaders who would be utterly ruthless. They learned to put on a good face, and many of them are glamorous, attractive. They stick together, for the most part, because it is in their best interests, not because there is great love between them. And so I come to you tonight to ask you to have compassion, to be aware there is no one who was untouched by this. There is no one who could have withstood the kind of extreme torture that these souls have undergone. I ask not that you be forgiving, for there is a feeling, a place within you that is far beyond that. It is the place in the center of yourself. KATHRYN calls it visual centering, the place where you move into your channel of light, where you connect with us in the deepest possible way, and you will feel what we feel. It is not forgiveness. It is simply truth. We see that there is no one who could have survived this and remained steadfastly kind, loving, generous. There is no such thing as fault when inevitability is involved. What we learned from this experiment, what all of you have learned and will know when you come to the higher dimensions to be by our side, and when your mentors come to tell you the true story of Earth, you will learn it is not what you thought it was. Much has been lost, but in the long run, much has been gained. Once you know the whole story, you will simply understand and accept that it could not have been otherwise. And so there is no need for forgiveness, because there is no wrong or right. There simply is what happened. It happened to every one of you. And this, my beloved children, is the lesson. You asked us for free will. We granted it. You asked us for a world in which you could experience denseness, intensity, challenges. You wanted to experience everything you could possibly experience, and it was granted. We will, together, look back at this, look at all of it, talk with you about it. Look at it from every point of view. Every individual story matters. And just as we decided upon this experiment, the great experiment that is planet Earth, we will decide together what we think of this, how we feel about it, and whether we will ever decide to do something like this again. There are new universes, new places, new experiences for you, for all of you. Whether you should remain here with your beloved Earth or return to the planets of your origins, or strike out across new universes to experience wonderful new things, this story will forever color what we think about, what we choose, how we go about our creations. Open your hearts, dear ones. Know that there is no good or bad here. Oh, yes, there is plenty to talk about, to tell of, that was painful, destructive, unfortunate. But there is no blame. There is no one person, one group, no individual who can be tried and punished. There will be no such thing. There is no jail big enough to hold everyone who took part in this. It was an experiment. You might say it went wrong. You might say it was unpredictable. You might just say it happened. And we learn things from this. You, your families, your higher souls, all of us. Father and I have learned. We have all grown from this. You see, what I'm telling you is that we did not predict everything that would happen. This was not all predestined. Some of you have said, and now we're finding out that everyone was making it up as they went along. Well, to some extent, yes. We can foresee. We can see timelines. But we can't predict every action. Not when you have free will, and there are billions of you. Of course we can't. We can be flexible. We can talk with our beautiful company of heaven who are so creative and resourceful and helpful. Every step of the way, we were there to try to cushion the blow, to stanch the tide, to soften the results of what was going on. In some cases, it was decided that we would allow it to be played out because this was your wish. It was always the wish of humankind to allow this experiment to come full circle. And now, my beloved ones, it has. The things that are coming for you, not just in your lifetime, but in this week, in this month, this year, will be unbelievable to you, given where you've been, given how hard you've worked. It has become so common for all of you to think, well, this is just the way the world is. There is no such thing as just the way the world is. It's all changing, and you are creating the changes. Every time you smile at a stranger, every time you take a child's hand, every time you reach out in friendship, kindness, and compassion, you create. You create a new event, a new feeling, new life. This is what you're doing now. We tell you so often, be aware of what you think. Be aware of what you feel. Because you are always creating. You're used to hearing me tell you that now, aren't you? And you're learning that what I've told you is true. You create the weather. You create the atmosphere in your home. You create the kinds of things that happen to you during the day. Now, I'm not saying that every single thing that happens to you is your fault. Please do not interpret it that way. And please don't send KATHRYN lots of emails saying, Mother said it's all our fault, and all of this would have happened sooner if it weren't for us. Well, of course that's not true. It all played out just as it was intended. And when I say just as it was intended, I don't just mean your father and I intended it. I mean it was the plan for all of humankind. Terra herself was a part of the agreement. It all worked out. And in these final days, we wait for those beautiful sons and daughters whose incarnations remain on earth. Their higher selves have been taken to the temple. They are now new souls who will be restored and retrained. They will begin to learn about love. They will start over. That is not a reward for anything they've done. It is simply a way to help souls begin again. No matter how much damage, no matter how much pain they may have experienced, they will have the chance to start over. Those who are still here in the bodies do not have a higher self any longer. We are sustaining them. Now you may wonder, why would we want to sustain anyone who's doing terrible things? That is not the purpose. We are working diligently with our angels, our masters, to get through to them. And there are also many whose higher selves came to the temple and were restored to the light, and they are working diligently to help get through. It is working. But the difficulty remains that these are souls who were terribly damaged, whose spirit, body, and mind were subjected to, well, how can I describe it to you? You've heard about various kinds of torture where people are taught to admit things that were not true, where they were tormented until they would give in, where they were humiliated, beaten. But worst of all, were the ones who were tormented at the hands of their own parents. How does a child survive that? How does a being sustain themselves in the face of that kind of abuse? These are the ones, dear ones, these are the ones you are waiting to welcome home. We feel it's worth it because every soul is precious to us. You have a saying, but for the grace of God, there go I. It is profoundly true. Ask yourself, if you were in the place of these ones who were so distorted in their thinking, would you want us to dissolve you? Look inside your hearts. Can you help us? Rather than condemn your brothers and sisters, help us. Send your intention that they awaken, that they find a way to feel the flame in their hearts. It is there. They still carry the flame that they were created with. They are alive, and they have souls, and so they can be restored. Help us by sending your intention of seeing them awaken. See them, feel their hearts. See them come to the realization that they belong. They belong at our side. They belong in the human community. They will find love if only they come. If only they turn their backs on the old and tired lives that they've lived and come to join us in love and peace and harmony. And we will welcome them. They must decide, however. I am not asking any of you to welcome someone into your life who is dangerous. I do not ask that of any child of mine. You must protect yourselves, but from a distance. Your thoughts, joined together, can bring peace to the planet. You can stop the wars, the massacres, the thousands of ways that people are unkind to one another. Through the force of your will, your intention, your passion, and your love, you can create the paradise that you have wished for. We are there. We are on the threshold of the new golden age. It has already begun in the way that a wave washes upon the shore and then recedes. You know that the wave has already been there, and there is another one coming. I wish you peace and harmony. I send you my love with all my heart. I speak for Father God, And we both send you the deepest, abiding love. You are our children, each and every one. We love you. Namaste. Namaste all. Until we speak again.